Guys who between them, via savvy investment, had made profits in excess of 10 billion US dollars, were to share some thoughts about Tesla FSD V12. Would it be worth listening?
We teased on the pod, I think at the start last time, that I had taken a test ride
Right.
in Tesla's new FSD 12, and I said, it kind of felt like a little bit of a Chat GPT moment. But I think we left the audience hanging. We got a lot of feedback. Hey, dig in more to that. So you and I spent some time on this, both together and with some folks on the Tesla team. So roughly the setup here, background. I want to get your reaction to it. Is about 12 months ago, the team pretty dramatically forked their self-driving model, right? Moving it from this really C++ deterministic model to what they refer to as an end-to-end model that's really driven by imitation learning, right? So we think of this new model, it's really video in and control out. It's faster, it's more accurate, but after 11 different versions of FSD, I think there's a lot of skepticism in the world. Like, is this going to be, something different? You sent me a video, and I tons of these videos, floating around at the moment, that really kind of shows, how this acts more like a human than prior models out there. So, Bill, kind of just react. You've watched this video, react to this video and give us your thoughts. I think you've been a longtime observer of self-driving. I might even describe you as a bit of a critic of, or a skeptic when it comes to full self-driving. So, is this a big moment? Did I overstate it? Kind of, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah. So, one of the critiques and concerns people had about self-driving is they would say that, we're 98% of the way there, or 99, but the last 1% is going to take as long as the first 99. And one of the reasons for that is it's nearly impossible to code for all of the corner cases. And the corner cases are where you have problems. That's where you end up in wrecks, right? And so the approach Tesla had been taken up until this point in time was one where you would literally try and code every object, every circumstance, every case in like a piece of software. This X happens, then Y, right? And that ends up being a patchwork, kind of just a big nasty, rat's nest of code, and it builds up and builds up and builds up and maybe even steps on itself, and it's not very elegant. What we learned this week is that they've completely tossed all of that out and gone with a neural network model where they're uploading videos from their best drivers, and literally the videos are the input and the output is the steering wheel, the brake, and the gas pedal.
Extraordinary.
And there's this principle known as Occam's razor, which has been around forever in science. But the simplified version of it is a simpler approach is much more likely to be the optimal approach.
Right.
And when I fully understood what they had done here, it seems to me this approach has a much better chance of going all the way and of being successful.
So, taking a quick pause here, I strongly agree, as I've said in the past, with Tesla essentially having burned to the ground their prior FSD build, which was riddled with code. What did Bill Gurley call it? A rat's nest or something along those lines? Fair call. With everything hard-coded, completely burning that to the ground and rebuilding with videos of good human drivers in and incredible capabilities out. No multiple layers of bullshit in between. It now seems quite clear that the path to full autonomy is clearly lit. Prior to then, there were still a lot of unknown unknowns. And until Tesla had made enough progress and hit a wall, they wouldn't know there was a wall ahead. But now we can see all the way to the end. It's a massive watershed moment. Many of the skeptics and haters scored epic own goals when Tesla made this complete rewrite, entirely new approach. The haters, the skeptics, they laugh and go, "Oh, Tesla don't know what they're doing. Look, they changed that, so they're so dumb. How far behind can you be?" Failing to understand that the only reason Tesla made this decision, the complete rewrite, to train this software end-to-end on video only, was because they're so far ahead into uncharted territory. They have now realized the optimal approach is no heuristics, no hard coding, just train it on good video. The end. It shows how far ahead Tesla are versus everyone else attempting to solve autonomy, who are still using very brittle approaches. Now, this clip was actually recorded more than a month ago, and in that time, we have seen so many updates on FSD V12, incremental improvements. The rate of change and improvement on this software is staggering. The pace of improvement has massively increased. So if we put two and two together here, FSD V12 has matched or exceeded the capabilities of all past versions combined, and did so having been trained in a fraction of the time, and now the rate of improvement is significantly greater than it previously was. Of course, no one knows for sure when the problem is finally solved. How long does that take? But if the rate of improvement is accelerating and it's already exceeded the capabilities of prior versions, it's a very positive sign, to put it lightly.
And certainly of being maintainable and reasonable. It's way more elegant. It requires them to upload a hell of a lot of video, which we can talk about.
Yes.
But and the other thing that's just so damn impressive is that this company, which is very large, hundreds of thousands of employees, made a decision so radical to kind of throw out the whole thing and start afresh. And it sounds like the genesis of that may have been, 3 or 4 years ago, but they got to the point where they're like, this is gonna be way better, and threw the whole thing out. And I think about 4 months after they made the change, Elon did a drive where he uploaded and kind of streamed the drive, so we can put that in the notes and people can watch it. But it's way different. It's way different. And in my mind, basically with this Occam Razor's notion, it's got a much higher chance of being wildly successful.
Yeah, let's dig in a little.
Again, I agree. And just for the record, Tesla's approach now is essentially the same way that humans learn to drive. Photons into our dual camera based system called eyes, inference via our neural network, our brain, and controls out, as opposed to the previous strategy, which would have been equivalent to hard coding a bunch of instructions on how to drive a vehicle, what road signs are, and literally everything there fuck else to do with driving a vehicle into our brains somehow at birth.
Little bit into how it's different, right? So, and you referenced a little of this. So, like for example, this model does not have a deterministic view of a stoplight, right?
No.
I mean, Kaparthi has talked about this before. Before you have to label a stoplight, right? So you would basically take the data from the car. That would be your perception data. You would draw a box around a stoplight. You would say this is this is a stoplight. So that your first job on the car would have to be to identify that you're at a stoplight. Then the second thing is you would write all of this C++ that would deterministically say when you are at a stoplight, here's what the controls should do, right? And so for all of that second half of the model, the heuristics, the planning, and the execution, that was all driven by this patchwork that you're talking about. And that was like you would just chase, every one of these corner cases and you could never solve them all. Now in this new model, it's pixels in. So the model itself has no code. It doesn't know this is a stoplight per se. In fact, they just watch the driver's behavior. So the driver's behavior is actually the label. It says when we see pixels like this on the screen, here's how the model should behave, which I thought is just an extraordinary break. And I don't think there's a deep appreciation for the fact that, again, because we've had 11 versions of what came before it, those were just slightly better patchwork models. In fact, I think what we learned was that the rate of improvement of this is order of magnitude 5 to 10x better per month as a model versus the rate of improvement of those prior systems.
And once
Facts, extremely important facts as well. Again, I mentioned this prior. The rate of improvement here has significantly cranked up. Now, in fairness, eventually Tesla, I believe, would have solved autonomy with the patchwork model. It's just inelegant, messy, a total clusterfuck, inefficient. But hey, with enough time and enough data, I believe they would have done it. However, this end-to-end approach, pixels in, controls out, as Brad described, is just so elegant and efficient. And as we're seeing, the rate of progress has ratcheted up so much now. But a lot of people still aren't quite appreciating this yet.
once again, the audacity to throw out the whole old thing and put a new thing in is just crazy. One thing for the listeners, well, actually two things I would mention. One, in terms of just how they got this going, a lot of people I fear equate AI with LLMs because it was really the arrival of ChatGPT and the LLM that I think introduced what AI was capable of to most people. But those are language models. That's what one of the L's stands for. And these AI models that Tesla's used for FSD 12 are these generic open source AI models that you can find on Hugging Face, and they obviously customized them. So there's some proprietary code there at Tesla, but AI has been evolving for a very long time, and this notion of neural networks was around before the LLMs popped out, which is why they had started on this 4 years ago or whatever, right?
Right.
But the foundational elements, are there. And by the way, they use they use the hardware that we're talking about, right? They use the big NVIDIA clusters to do the training. They need some type of GPU or TPU to do the inference at runtime. So that it's the same hardware the LLMs use, but it's not the same type of code. I just thought that was worth mentioning. And
Yeah, no,
had found
it's a to me, if we dig in a little bit to the model itself, the transformers, the diffusion architecture, the convolution neural nets, those are all like these modular open source building blocks, right? Like the thing that's extraordinary to me, and we're going to get later in the pod to this open versus closed debate, but like this is just this great example. You talk about ideas having sex. I mean, these open source modular components, those have been worked on for the last decade, and now they're bringing those components together, and now all of their energy, and I want to dig into this a little bit, that is really going. They're taking all these engineers who were writing the C++, these deterministic, patches effectively, and now they're focusing them on how do we make sure that our data infrastructure, that the data that we're pulling off of the edge comes in and makes these models better. So all of a sudden it becomes about the data, because the model itself is just digesting this data, brute forcing it with a lot of this, NVIDIA hardware, and outputting better models.
It's such a classic Silicon Valley startup thing where you need all the pieces to line up. If you go back and watch, if you haven't watched, if anyone's watched the General Magic video, which is fantastic, it's on the internet, about why General Magic didn't work. And Tony Fadell, who ended up building the iPod and ran engineering for the iPhone, talks about how the pieces just weren't there. So they were having to do all the pieces, right? The network and the chips, and it just wasn't there yet. And so these models have been around, maybe ahead of the hardware, and now NVIDIA is bringing the hardware, and these pieces start to come together. And then the data, and I think one of the most fascinating things about this story of Tesla and FSD 12 is when you understand where they get the data. So they are tracking their best drivers with 5 cameras, and the drivers know it. They've opted into the program, and they upload the video overnight. And so, talk about the pieces coming together. We've found Reddit forums and stuff we can put links to in the notes where users are Tesla drivers are saying they're uploading 10 gigabit a night. And so, you had to have the Wi-Fi infrastructure,
Totally.
like how would it be possible to upload that much? Here's someone whose Tesla uploaded 115 gigabyte in a month, right?
So just taking a quick break here. Fascinating conversation. I know it's a bit nerdy and technical, but the point about needing all of the pieces to align is so critical. The reason we didn't have iPhones in the 1970s or 80s is because it wasn't possible. In theory, it could have been attempted, but the cost to produce something like that would probably have been $1 million+. One of the things Tesla does so well, and I really want to underscore this, does so well, is look into the future, understand where things are heading, e.g., with electric vehicles. Battery costs will decline as they scale up, will eventually reach price parity with ICE vehicles and then continue to become even more affordable over time. The electronics in the vehicles will continue to become more affordable, these kind of things. Oh, wait, okay, well, today they won't be that affordable, but if we produce them, drive profits into the next generation scale-up production, they will be cost-effective in the future. We can reach high volume and so on. Autonomy is another example, and humanoid robots are another example. Tesla has this brilliant capacity, which comes straight from the top, to look into the future, 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, think what is possible then and start putting in place the stepping stones to reach that end destination when everyone else thinks they're insane. What destination? That's not going to be possible. That isn't possible. You must be high. An incredible example of not getting this, not seeing the future, is automotive manufacturers today who temporarily thought, oh shit, people are buying Teslas. Maybe we should make electric vehicles too. These same morons who, by the way, were about 15 years late to the party, had to see consumers buying Tesla vehicles hand over fist before they thought about it, who are now suddenly slowing their EV plans and quadrupling down on hybrids because these morons are not looking into the future, not seeing battery costs continuing to decline. They're not seeing the pieces of the puzzle. And by the time they realize what's possible, it's going to be too late. So what we're seeing happening now with autonomy couldn't really have happened sooner. There wasn't available compute. I mean, imagine the idea, let's say in the 1990s, you're trying to pursue autonomy and you have to figure out some way to have vehicles on roads covered in sensors that are uploading in a single month over 100 gigabytes of data. Madness. By the way, special shout out to the absolute high quality human beings on Reddit, especially the mods. What a great online resource without any bias and zero ban happy basement dwellers.
And so these are massive numbers. And the infrastructure 5 years ago, your car couldn't have done this. And, I think we'll talk about competition in a minute, but who else has the capacity to do this, right? It's unbelievable to the footprint of cars they have. And then the notion that, oh yeah, we could just go upload this data. And it is a buttload of data.
It sure fucking is a buttload of data. And as Bill asked, who else has the capacity to do this? The answer, of course, is no one. No other company has 6+ million vehicles on roads collecting and uploading data. No one. The answer is literally no one. And that's not hyperbole. The answer to that question, who else could do this, is no one. Unless, of course, they just press the magic catch up to Tesla button, which apparently a lot of folks seem to think exists.
So you just do the math. 5 million cars, 30 miles a day, I think 8 cameras on the car, 5 megapixels each, and then the data going back 10 years, right? This amount of shadow data, you could combine the clusters of every hyperscaler in the world, and you couldn't possibly store all of this data, right? That's the size of the challenge. So what they've had to do is process this data on the edge. And in fact, I think 99% of the data that a car collects never makes it back to Tesla. So, they're using video compression, these remote send filters, they're running, neural nets and software on the car itself. So basically they, for example, if 80% of your driving is the highway and there's nothing interesting that happens on the highway, then you can just throw out all that data.
This is super important. What matters here is sorting out filtering for the data you actually need, which is a fraction of everything you collect. But the challenge here is you must collect everything in order to get the tiny specks of data you actually need. Imagine fossicking for gold. In order to find the specks of gold, the stuff you actually want, you need to fossick through a fuckload of material that you don't need. And if you're not collecting vast quantities of data, you will never get the stuff you actually need, the stuff that actually matters, the edge cases.
So what they're really looking for is, what is the data that is a long way away from the mean data, right? So what are these outlier moments? And then can we find tens or hundreds or thousands of those moments to train the model? So they're literally pulling this compressed, filtered data every single night off of these cars. They built an autonomous system. So before, they would have engineers look at that data and say, okay, what have we perceived here now? How do we write, this patchwork code? Instead, this is simply going into the model itself. It's fine-tuning the model. And they're constantly running this autonomous process of fine-tuning these models. And then they're re-uploading those models back to the car. Okay.
Yep.
This is why you get these exponential moments of improvement, right?
Yep.
That we're seeing now, which then brings us back to Bill, this question, Tesla has 5 million cars on the road. They have all this infrastructure. They have they are collecting this data. We know they're a couple years ahead. Think about Waymo, for example. They're still using the old architecture. It's geofenced. I don't know. They have 30 or 40 cars on a road, and they're only running the. So do they have any chance? Does Waymo have any chance of competing or even adopting this architecture?
Let me think for a moment here. Fuck no.
It's such an interesting question. And by the way, just on one quick comment on the previous thing you said, it's genius actually that they've taught the car what moments it should record.
Exactly.
And so they mentioned to us an example of anytime there's, Well, obviously a disengagement. So a disengagement becomes a moment where they want the video before and the video after. The other thing would be any abrupt movement. So if the gas goes fast, or if the brake is hit quickly, or if the steering wheel jerks, that becomes a recordable moment. And the part I didn't know, which they told us, which is just fascinating, people with LLMs have heard about reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, and they've talked about how that could make it. Even with Gemini, they said maybe that was what caused that. What we were told is that these moments where like the car jerks or whatever, if it is super relevant, they can put that in the model with extra weight. And so it tells the model, if this circumstance arises, this is something that's more important and you have to pay extra attention to. And so if you think about these corner case scenarios, which we all know are the biggest problems in self-driving, now they have a way to only capture the things that are most likely to be those things and to learn on them. So the amount of data they needed to get started was this impossible amount of data with the millions of cars. And now the way that plays to their advantage is they're much more likely to capture these more severe, less frequent moments because of the bigger footprint. And so you say to yourself, you ask the question, I don't know who could compete. It's
That's a general way of saying the so-called competition is fucked and they may as well just give up. Of course, Bill would not say that directly, but that is the actual truth. No one can compete. No one has the fleet. No one has the existing data. And certainly, to the earlier analogy, no one now has autofossic for edge cases. Ain't no one catching up.
Certainly couldn't. If let's make an assertion, if this type of neural network approach is the right answer,
Yes.
and once again, Occam's razor seems that way to me, then who could compete? And one of the companies, or two, several of the companies who would be least likely would be Cruise and Waymo and these things, because they just don't have that many cars.
Bill Gurley out here is spitting facts. Please don't tell that to the autonomy leaderboard published by some hack from the legacy automotive industry who obviously knows a lot about things other than autonomy. Now, this is really important. I've said it before. I've said it again. Cruise and Waymo, what they're doing might look impressive, but they're glorified party tricks in a little sandbox with training wheels and guardrails. They do not have scalable solutions. They compensate for a lack of data and a lack of intelligence by putting guardrails, training wheels, safety nets, and massively overcompensating via complexity in order to create a general autonomous solution that is generalized, scalable, widely. You need the data. And if you don't have the fleet, you don't have the data. Now, there is a bit of a curveball possibility. I don't think it's that likely, but it is possible if companies are too dumb to just license FSD from Tesla directly, which is the obvious thing to do when they realize that they're not going to solve it themselves. It is technically possible that Tesla could license their data stream to other companies to train on, but why add the unnecessary steps? Now, here's an interesting thought. What is the true value of the data that Tesla has already collected? Because I can guarantee that is not listed as a current asset on Tesla's balance sheet, though it should be. More to the point, what is the value of Tesla's data coming in every single day from their fleet of vehicles? The answer is not zero, that's for sure. And remember, at the end of the day, what Tesla is really solving is vision, seeing, perceiving, planning, and acting in the real world. A huge amount of what Tesla is doing with FSD translates directly or mostly into a humanoid robot. Maybe it would be a good idea for Tesla to start developing a humanoid robot. Oh, wait, they are. So here's a thought. Imagine a few years from now when Bill and Brad are discussing Tesla's fleet of X number of robots, which is multiple orders of magnitude more than the next largest fleet. The equivalent today would be Cruise and Waymo versus Tesla's fleet of 5 to 6, well, technically 6+ million vehicles, but at least 5 of them are capturing and returning data. Could this same conversation be playing out again regarding humanoid robots? Bit of food for thought.
Cruise and Waymo and these things, because they just don't have that many cars. That's and right. Their cars cost $150,000. So if they wanted to have, like, the math just doesn't work. You can't build the footprint. And so who could? I don't know. Could you what would it cost to build a 5-camera device to put on top of every Uber? I don't know, like a lot. It would be weird.
But they're not gonna do it. I mean, like, and that to me is, when you look at these alternative models, right? If this really is about data, and remember, Bill just said an important point, which is it's not just about quantity of data. Something magic happens around 1 million cars. Yes, you've got to get all that quantity of data, but to get the long tail events, right?
Yeah.
These are events that occur tens or just hundreds of times. That's where you really need millions of cars. Otherwise, you don't have a statistically relevant pool of these long tail instances. And what they're uploading from the edge, Bill, he said each instance is a few seconds long of video and plus some additional vehicle driving metadata. And it's those events, if you only have hundreds of cars or thousands of cars, you can get a lot of data quickly. It's not about quantum of data. 100 cars can produce a huge quantum of data driving
right.
1,000 miles. It's about the quality of the data, those adverse events.
Yes, and I guess the other type of company that maybe could take a swing at it would be like Mobileye or something. The problem they have is they don't control the whole design of the car, and so this part where Tesla has the car in the garage at night and uploads gigabytes and puts it right into the model, like, are they going to be able to get that done working with other OEMs? Like, are they going to be able to organize all of that? Do they have the piece on the car that says when to record and when not to record? And like, it's just a massive infrastructure question. I would probably, if I had to handicap anybody, it would probably be BYD or one of the Chinese manufacturers.
Right. And if you think about they have a lot of miles driven in China, right? Much less so outside of China. I imagine you're going to have some of this nationalistic stuff that that emerges on both ends of this. But like one of the things I asked our analyst, Bill, is like if we just step back, I think these guys have network advantage, they have data advantage, they're clearly in the lead, they have bigger H100 clusters than the people they're competing against. I mean, they have all sorts of things that have come together here. But if you think about like what's the so what to Tesla, right? And just in the first instance, and we'll pull up this slide that Frida on our team made. If you look at the unit economics of a Tesla, right, with no FSD, they're making about $2,500 on a vehicle. If you look at it today, they have about 7% penetration of FSD. That was, let's call it through FSD 11. And those people paid $12,000 incrementally for that FSD. And as we know, you can go read about it on Twitter. People are like, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as I thought it would be. So now we have this big moment of a step, what feels like, kind of a step function, the model getting better at a much faster rate. So I asked the question, what if we reduce the price on this by half? Right? What if Tesla said this is such a good product, we think we want to drive penetration, so let's make it $500 a month, not $1,000 a month. So if you assume that you have penetration, go from 7% to 20%, give it to everybody for free. They drive around for a month. They're like, wow, this really does feel like a human driver. I'm happy to pay $500 a month. If you get to 20% penetration, then your contribution margin at Tesla, right, is about the same, even though you're charging half as much. Now, if you get to 50% penetration, all of a sudden you're creating billions of dollars in incremental EBITDA. Now, think about this from a Tesla perspective. Why do they want to drive even more adoption of FSD? Well, you
One reason would be more data.
Get a lot more information and data about disengagements and all these other things. So that data then, continues to turn the flywheel. So my guess is that Tesla, seeing this meaningful improvement, is going to focus on penetration. My guess is that they want to get a lot more people trying the product, and they're going to play around with price. Why not? Right? Maybe $100 a month is the right, intersection.
So as I mentioned earlier, this video was recorded more than a month ago. Guess what? Since this was recorded, Tesla has literally cut the price of FSD in half. So credit where it's due here. The dude fucking called it. Legend.
Between adoption or penetration and price. But again, I think that all of these things are occurring at an accelerating rate at Tesla. And when I look around, I still hear people saying Waymo's worth 50 or 60 billion bucks, but you could be in a situation on that business where it just gets passed really quickly and they have a hard time structurally of catching up.
Well, and people have said that, and if someone has data, once again, that they want to correct this, I'd be glad to state to recorrect the data. But we've been told they have a head count similar to Cruise, and the Cruise financials came out, and they were horrific. And so I don't have any reason to believe that the Waymo financials are any different than the Cruise ones. And
Right.
I've always thought this model that we're going to build this incredible car, and our business model is going to be to run a service. Like the CapEx, like if you just build a 10-year model, the CapEx you need, like they would have to go raise 100 billion. And there's another element that's super
Important point. A great opportunity to once again discuss the 420 IQ decision by Tesla. Their model, so absurd, it's just, we have to say it out loud. Method 1, Cruise, Waymo, using some round numbers. Spend $150,000 on a vehicle, as in lose $150,000 per vehicle on roads. Then pay an engineer, call it another $100,000 a year to drive the thing, to train it. Additionally, pay people to remotely supervise your vehicles. In other words, lose a couple of $100,000 per vehicle on roads. Tesla's approach, sell a vehicle to consumers and make a few $1,000s per vehicle sold, and then for free, consumers voluntarily, while using the vehicle, train the software to get better as the vehicle itself collects fuck tons of invaluable data. These two business models are not alike. So is it just me, or does anyone else get the sense that these two guys possibly believe that Tesla may in fact have what some could describe as an unassailable lead when it comes to autonomy, and that companies like Cruise and Waymo are completely and utterly fucked? Am I the only one getting that impression? Want more content? Early access? Bunch of perks? Click the links in the pinned comment. AG1 has given me a massive, meaningful boost in energy, allowing me to do a lot more every day, including using my brain more and using my body more. This is a recurring theme. If you give your body everything it needs for weight, aka a fat motherfucker. So I was skeptical. These comments is also currently short Tesla stock. I'm not particularly concerned about people having a negative perception, those folks suffering from small brain syndrome, still living in my bum's basement syndrome, etc., writing mean comments, claiming AG1's a scam or it doesn't work. I mean, bro, when I get feedback like this is what keeps me going. Just try this stuff for a month, and if you don't get the